Note: I assumed that people were interested in a deep dive on this case. But I didn't realize when I started just how much that involved. I have put only some of the mountains of information available on the case here. And given the length, I will split it into several parts. Also, please don't ask for a deep dive on the Green River Killer, because that would need an encyclopedia to complete. In response to some of my comments, I have received several requests for a write-up on Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. In light of those requests, I will cover the case in detail on this occasion. There is a lot of information and many different aspects to cover, so this will be a rather long article. Before I start, I'd like to make some general comments and then some particular to this case. 1. We will be dealing with some extreme subject matter. It of course goes with the territory. If you don't wish to read about extreme behavior, do not read any further. You have been warned. 2. The purpose of this is simply to present the facts. It is not intended to glorify the killers, nor take some perverted delight in detailing aberrant behavior. Because of the nature of the case, it will inevitably deal with some touchy topics. Let me be clear. I welcome calm, reasoned discussion. If you wish to rant, abuse, give a sermon, tell others what we should be thinking, etc., you will be blocked. Period. 3. I saw another comment which indicated that the son of the first recognized victim had asked that people stop referring to Sutcliffe as the Ripper because it reminded him of what he had done to their family members. Whilst I sympathize, the fact remains that that is what he was known as. There are countless killers who have been given the Ripper moniker, and I'm sure there will be more. I'm also fairly sure that family members of the victims do not frequent true crime discussion sites. However, out of consideration for that request, I will call Sutcliffe if I think his nickname can be avoided. 4. There is a current movement, spearheaded by historian Hallie Rubenhold, to dispute the denomination of the Jack the Ripper victims as prostitutes. This has extended to some of Sutcliffe's victims as well. In the case of Jack's victims, many other ripperologists and scholars have pointed out her willful disregarding of the facts. The number of women prostituting during the Victorian age was staggeringly high. Although London police reports recorded there to be approximately 8,600 prostitutes known to them, it has been suggested that the true number of women prostituting during this time was closer to 80,000. Life was so difficult for these women. They would often sell themselves for as little as 3 pence or just a stale loaf of bread. In the case of Sutcliffe's victims, I saw a writer say that one victim was not a prostitute, but was working as a prostitute due to financial hardship. Unless the English language has changed and I haven't heard about, that means she was a prostitute at the time. This movement is of course spearheaded by women, but I find that confusing. Is being a prostitute something shameful? Did the women deserve to die because of that? Was their death less meaningful because they were? Of course not. While some people make a moral judgment about prostitution, I, for one, do not. Acknowledging that a victim was a prostitute should not be something to be avoided. What I do agree with is that the attitude of the police at the time, and some people even now, that they had it coming to them, or they were whores so they deserved it, should be rejected and castigated where possible. It should also be acknowledged, however, that working in that profession did and does make women more vulnerable to assault by serial killers and other psychopaths. Not that that really made a difference in Sutcliffe's case, because as we shall see, the son of a bitch attacked anyone if the opportunity arose. Okay. With that out of the way, let's begin. On the 2nd of January 1981, Olivia Reevers, 24, who had been a prostitute for 4 years, was walking along Broomhall Street in Sheffield when she saw a Rover car. I was walking on the pavement when it stopped. The driver asked me if I was doing business and I said I was. I told him it was £10 in the car with a rubber. He said that it was okay. After getting in the car, they drove half a mile to Melbourne Avenue and parked in the driveway of the light trades house. She continued. He stopped his car and turned out the lights. I said to him, "Would you like to pay first? Please?" He gave me a £10 note and I took a rubber out and had it in my hand, putting the money into the packet. He asked, "Do you mind if I talk to you a bit?" I said, "No." He said that he had had an argument with his wife. He did not say what about or what the result of the argument had been. He asked me my name and I said, "Sharon." He said his name was Dave. He then took off his car coat and put it on the back seat. He said, "Would you like to get in the back?" I said, "No, it's all right," while Reevers removed the underwear she was wearing under her dress. Sutcliffe removed his black plastic car coat and laid it across the back seat. Having unzipped his trousers, he lowered himself onto her, while they tried to have sex for about 10 minutes or so. He still had not achieved an erection, and when she said, "I don't think we'll be able to do it," he replied, "It looks like it," as they returned to the early conversation. Sutcliffe telling her about not being able to go with his wife. When the car interior was suddenly illuminated by headlights as a car turned into the drive and parked nose to nose with Sutcliffe's Rover. With that, the beginning of the end had come for Peter Sutcliffe, the man who had terrified Britain for so long in his reign of terror as the Yorkshire Ripper. Sergeant Robert Ring, a 26-year veteran of the South Yorkshire Police, and probationary constable Robert Hydes had started their night shift at the nearby Hamerton Road police station at 10 p.m. and set off on a general patrol with Melbourne Avenue, one of their first patrols. At around 10:30 p.m., they were cruising along the road when they spotted the dark, squared-shaped car parked halfway up the driveway of the light trades house, and had little doubt as to the reason why the car was there. When PC Robert Hydes approached the car, Peter Sutcliffe told Olivia Reevers, "Leave it to me. You're my girlfriend." After winding down the window, Sutcliffe said as much, as well as saying it was his car and that his name was Peter Williams. Meanwhile, Sergeant Robert Ring was at the back of the car looking at the number plates. He returned to the police car and radioed via police headquarters for a check on the number plates. With the National Police computer in Hendon, he was soon joined by PC Hydes, who had been openly skeptical about the information Sutcliffe had told. While the two officers waited for the results of the check, Peter Sutcliffe asked Olivia Reevers, "Can't you make a run for it?" She replied, "No, I can't," and then explained that she was a well-known prostitute. After receiving the information that the number plates actually belonged to a Skoda, not a Rover, the two officers returned to Sutcliffe's car. Sergeant Ring, in his police report that was read into the court record at Sutcliffe's trial, said, "He said that she's my girlfriend and I asked what her name was. He said, 'I don't know. I have not known her that long.' I said, 'Who are you trying to kid? I haven't fallen off the Christmas tree.' To which Sutcliffe said, 'I'm not suggesting you have,' informing Sutcliffe that the number plates were not for his car. He removed the car keys from the steering column. PC Hydes, meanwhile, had discovered that the false plates were only held on by black electrical tape. The two officers then escorted Olivia Reevers back to their police car. Sitting alone in his car, Peter Sutcliffe immediately knew the jig was up, and tried to dispose of the evidence. He quickly grabbed the ball-peen hammer and the single-bladed knife he had concealed under his car seat and headed for a stone porch that abutted onto the building behind his car. Without waiting for permission, he explained he was bursting for a pee, which the police were prepared to take his word for it, and headed out of view of the officers. At the porch there was an oil storage tank for the building, and Sutcliffe took both weapons and placed them onto some leaves on the ground behind the storage tank and against the wall. Hoping the officers hadn't heard the clinking sound, he then returned to his car, leaving Sutcliffe's rover at the scene. The officers took both Peter Sutcliffe and Olivia Reevers to the Hamerton Road police station. At the station, Peter Sutcliffe asked to use the lavatory. There was a knife in his jacket, which was accessible through a hole in the pocket. As he later told police, "I went there straight away as soon as I got to the police station. I dropped it in the top of the water cistern so it wouldn't be found in my possession." Still in the pocket of his jacket was a length of rope, the same one he had used in the strangulation of Marguerite Walls and in the attempted strangulation of Upadhyaya Bandara. He admitted to being Peter Sutcliffe, of No. 6 Garden Lane, Bradford, as well as to having stolen the number plates. He explained that he had used the plates because in less than 2 weeks he was due in court on a drunk driving charge. He said, "The insurance had just run out, and I knew I were about to lose my license in court. So it weren't worth renewing it." He said the number plates had been stolen from a scrapyard at Cooper Bridge, near Mirfield, West Yorkshire. If a charge of theft was to be pressed against him, then he would have to be handed over to the police force who had jurisdiction for the area where the theft occurred. By 2:30 a.m. Peter Sutcliffe was asleep in his cell. "I just went to sleep. I did. I felt, like always, that I'd get out of this one if I wanted to. I could convince them it were just theft. I was still being fed instructions as to how I could go on with my mission. Although I'd been prevented from killing that girl in the car." Phone calls to Wakefield, Bradford, Leeds, and finally to Dewsbury, at 5:12 a.m. established who would be handling the theft charge. The Dewsbury police informed the Sheffield police that after the new shift came on duty at 6 a.m. they would send somebody to collect Peter Sutcliffe. 3 West Yorkshire officers travelled to Sheffield to pick up Peter Sutcliffe. One of the officers would drive back his brown Rover car. Normally a charge of theft of property worth only 50 pence would result in immediate remand on bail. However, after the sloppy police work done shortly an earlier murder, where after the handbag stained with blood spots had been found, the police had only done a cursory search and failed to find other items at the scene of attack, or find her body. A directive was issued from Chief Constable Ronald Gregory that any man found with prostitutes in suspicious circumstances was to be brought to the attention of the Ripper Squad. The station sergeant at Dewsbury, therefore, phoned the duty officer at Ripper Incident Room at Millgarth at 8 a.m. Saturday, January 3, to inform him of the situation and Sutcliffe's impending arrival. At 8:55 a.m., Peter Sutcliffe and 2 police officers arrived at Dewsbury Police Station after a 35-minute journey from Sheffield. His car, driven by another officer, arrived shortly afterwards. During the journey, Sutcliffe and the 2 officers had hardly spoken. At 8:59 a.m., Peter Sutcliffe was logged in at the station desk, and a strip search revealed some money not noticed at Sheffield. The strip search also revealed one of his murder suits, made from a sweater. The Yorkshireman was wearing an inverted V-neck jumper, but the sleeves had been pulled over his legs, with the opening exposing his crotch and genitals. The elbows were padded, so his knees wouldn't be scratched when kneeling over his victims' bodies. This was designed to kneel over the body exposing himself, and pleasure himself over the body, said Richard Charles Cobb, author of the book, On the Trail of the Yorkshire Ripper. His final secrets revealed. This information was kept secret at the time and was not revealed for many years. He was then taken to the interview rooms in the basement. Within the first hour, Sutcliffe, who did not appear surprised at such attention for such a minor offence, told police officers he was a lorry driver from Bradford and had made regular deliveries to Sunderland in his 32-ton Arctic, talked about his interest in cars, and said that he had been interviewed as part of the £5 note inquiry, and as a result of the surveillance operations in red light areas. At 10 a.m., detectives at Dewsbury placed another call to the Ripper incident room to convey that they might very well be interested in interviewing Peter Sutcliffe. The police officers who had been interviewing Sutcliffe had noticed his dark, almost frizzy hair, the gap between his front teeth, and that his shoe size was consistent with footprints left at the scene of 3 murders. At around the same time, Sonia Sutcliffe was notified that her husband was in police custody being questioned about the theft of number plates. At around noon, Detective Sergeant Desmond O'Boyle arrived at Dewsbury Police Station. Det Sergeant O'Boyle, attached to the Ripper Squad, was once a detective in Manningham, Bradford. He had seen the files on Peter Sutcliffe which showed that he was already known to the Ripper Squad, and had been seen a number of times by police during the Ripper investigation. First in regards to the £5 note, then because of surveillance when his car number was noted in Bradford, Leeds, and Manchester red light areas, and because he worked for an engineering firm. Det Sergeant O'Boyle began his interview with Peter Sutcliffe by introducing himself as a member of the Ripper Squad. While Sutcliffe appeared to be no more likely a suspect for the Ripper murders than the many others who had been checked out previously, he started the probing of Sutcliffe to build up a profile of the pleasant and cooperative man sitting across from him at the table, by finding out his interests, home and social life, employment record, and other relevant factors. Questioned about his arrest, Sutcliffe told him he had left his home at about 4 p.m. to look for spare parts for his Mini and Rover cars. He found one number plate had fallen off a Skoda, and pulled off the other, since his insurance had run out the previous night, and he was due on a breathalyzer charge. He thought he could use the plates for a few days. After discussion of the events of the arrest, Det Sergeant O'Boyle inquired whether Sutcliffe was having normal sex with his wife. Sutcliffe replied that he was, and the last time was about 4 days ago. He was further questioned about sex since he had stated he and his wife were constantly rowing. Sutcliffe said, "We forget about rows when we go to bed." One of the few times that Peter Sutcliffe seemed concerned and did not want to cooperate was when Det Sergeant O'Boyle asked him for a blood sample. Sutcliffe at one point asked, "What if it's the same as the one you're wanting?" Quote. O'Boyle then asked, "Are you the Ripper?" Sutcliffe said that he wasn't. O'Boyle asked, "Well, what have you to fear?" Quote. Sutcliffe replied, "Oh, all right then. Will you let me know the result of the blood test as soon as you get it? Quote, Sutcliffe then cooperated with the police doctor and gave a blood sample. The blood test showed that Peter Sutcliffe belonged to the rare B group. By 5:30 p.m., Det Sergeant O'Boyle felt that it probably was a false alarm and that Peter Sutcliffe was unlikely to be the Ripper. He was prepared to recommend that Sutcliffe be released. Chief Superintendent John Clark, in charge at Dewsbury, was not so convinced, and still considered Sutcliffe as a major suspect in the Ripper case. He then ordered Det Sergeant O'Boyle to express his displeasure at the lack of rank of the man sent to interview Sutcliffe to the duty officer at the Leeds incident room. Detective Inspector John Boyle had taken over the murder room at 6 p.m. and agreed that Peter Sutcliffe was still a viable suspect. He instructed Det Sergeant Boyle to stay with the case and continue to interview Sutcliffe, as there was much more to be found out about him. When Det Sergeant Desmond O'Boyle resumed the interview, he began to go in harder on Peter Sutcliffe. The circumstances of his arrest in Sheffield were explored again. Sutcliffe had said that he had given 3 young men a ride to Rotherham and Sheffield. To my surprise, they offered me £10 to take them. Once in Sheffield, he had put the Skoda number plates over those of his Rover. While driving, a woman had flagged him down, and thinking she was in trouble, he stopped. She then asked whether he wanted business. I was surprised. I did not know she was a prostitute. I thought about things and realized I had £10 burning a hole in my pocket, and thought I might as well use it. The first girl had disappeared. So I drove on and saw another girl and stopped. She asked me if I wanted business. She got into the car and told me where to drive. I paid her £10. I did not want sex, I just wanted to talk about my problems at home. I did not want sex at all. He was also questioned about the times his car had been logged in red light areas in Leeds, Bradford, and Manchester, explaining about his previous denial of ever being to Manchester. He said that his car had broken down in the Bradford city centre and he had left it in the car park at Bradford Central Library, and that someone must have used it to go to Manchester and put it back on that spot. He was asked where he was on the night of the murder of Jacqueline Hill, November 17. Sutcliffe said that he believed he was with his wife at home. Det Sergeant O'Boyle informed him that his wife would be interviewed by the police the following morning. Sutcliffe appealed to him not to inform his wife that he had been arrested with a prostitute. O'Boyle stated, "You got yourself into this. As far as I'm concerned, I think you are a regular punter." Sutcliffe stated, "I am not. I've never been with another woman." O'Boyle countered, "Your car has been seen in the red light districts of Leeds and Manchester, and last night you were caught in a car with a prostitute in Sheffield and you paid her £10. I don't believe these are coincidences." Sutcliffe again stated, "It is true I am not a punter." At the trial, Det Sergeant O'Boyle was asked to describe Sutcliffe's manner during the interview. He replied, "He was very calm and pleasant and cooperative." James Chadwin, QC, defending Peter Sutcliffe, asked, "The 2 things he might be said to have reacted to was the suggestion that he was a punter. He clearly did not like that suggestion." Quote, O'Boyle, "No. I agree with you." Chadwin, "Then some reaction, though not very much, to the suggestion that he should give a blood sample." Quote, O'Boyle, "He seemed concerned when I mentioned a blood test. He didn't seem as if he wanted to cooperate. Though he eventually did." By 10 p.m., the interviews having concluded for the night, Peter Sutcliffe was in his cell. locked in for the night. Back in Sheffield. At 10 p.m. Sergeant Robert Ring was back at the Hamerton Road police station ready to start another shift. Here he learned that the man he had arrested 24 hours earlier with prostitute Olivia Reivers was still in custody at the Dewsbury police station and was being questioned by Ripper Squad detectives. It was then that he made a most crucial decision. He remembered that Peter Sutcliffe had left his car and gone off out of sight of the police officers to urinate. He decided to return to the light trades house and explore the area where Sutcliffe had gone. At around 11 p.m. Sergeant Ring was back in Melbourne Avenue and walked to the stone porch area where Sutcliffe had gone. He walked to the side of the porch and around the oil storage tank. Shining his torch on the ground beside the wall, he discovered a ball-peen hammer and a knife lying on the leaves. By 11:05 p.m., Hamerton Road police were informing the Ripper incident room of the important discovery, and were told to leave the weapons where they were until a photograph could be taken. Detective Inspector John Boyle, almost immediately after putting down the phone, got into a car and headed for Sheffield from Leeds. Arriving there, he ordered a more extensive search of the area and the re-interviewing of Olivia Reivers. At midnight, Boyle telephoned Dewsbury and told him about the developments. At 12 a.m. he phoned Detective Superintendent Richard Holland, who was in overall charge of the Ripper Squad that weekend, at his home in Elland, near Huddersfield, and said, "I think we've got him." At 9:30 a.m. Sunday, January 4, 1981, Detective Superintendent Dick Holland, Detective Sergeant Desmond O'Boyle, Detective Chief Inspector George Smith, and Detective Constable Jenny Crawford Brown were at the door of No. 6 Garden Lane, Heaton, Bradford, the home of Peter and Sonia Sutcliffe. A search was made of the house and a workshop at the back of the garage. When the police left the Sutcliffe residence at approximately 10 a.m. with Sonia Sutcliffe for questioning, they also took a number of tools, including ball-peen hammers, a hacksaw, and a yellow-handled screwdriver. A number of tools had already been recovered from Sutcliffe's Rover, including 3 screwdrivers that were in the glove compartment. Arriving at shortly after 10 a.m. at the police headquarters in Bradford. Sonia Sutcliffe was then involved in extensive questioning, building up a personal profile of their life, and being asked about her husband's movements on specific dates during the last 2 months. She had previously alibied her husband on at least 3 separate occasions. When shown the knife that had been found alongside the hammer at the Light Trades building in Sheffield, she identified it as one she had bought before her marriage for her bottom drawer. The questioning of Sonia Sutcliffe would last until approximately 8 p.m. that night, with brief break in the afternoon. Questioning of Sutcliffe resumed and intensified throughout the morning. Det Inspey Boyle and Det Sergeant Smith, while asking questions of a general nature, without overtly mentioning the Yorkshire Ripper attacks, tried systematically to close possible avenues of escape for Peter Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe appeared to them to be friendly, articulate, very calm, and cooperative. Not once did he ask for bail or a solicitor. After lunch, Det Inspey Boyle and Det Sergeant Smith began to change their tactics from general questioning and began to focus their interrogation on specific questions about Peter Sutcliffe's whereabouts on dates that were relevant to the Yorkshire Ripper murder inquiry. Unknown to Sutcliffe at the time was the fact that for the first time in any of the interviews he had been involved in, Sonia's recollection differed from his. She had told the police in Bradford that she clearly remembered him walking through the kitchen door that night at 10 p.m. The victim Teresa Sykes had been attacked at 8 p.m. and the officers felt that Sutcliffe was now struggling to remain plausible. When Sutcliffe was asked where he had been on November 17, the night of Jacqueline Hill's murder, he replied that he was at home with his wife. Det Insby Boyle said, "Every time you have been seen, you always seem to have the same alibi that you were at home with your wife. I find that rather strange. How can you be sure that's where you were?" Quote, Sutcliffe replied, "I'm always at home every night when I'm not on an overnight stay." When Det Insby Boyle switched the focus of the interview to the night of Sutcliffe's arrest, Sutcliffe's composure began to show signs it was faltering. Boyle: "I understand you were interviewed yesterday by DSO Boyle about your movements during last Friday afternoon and evening up until the time you were arrested at Sheffield." Sutcliffe: "Yes. I've told him what happened." Boyle: "I am not concerned with the allegation of theft of car number plates. I want to speak to you about a more serious matter. Concerning your reason for going to Sheffield that night." Sutcliffe: "I've told him all about that night." Boyle: "I've spoken to Sergeant O'Boyle and I am not satisfied with your account of that night." Sutcliffe: "What do you mean?" Quote, Boyle: "Why did you go to Sheffield that night?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "I gave 3 people a lift to Rotherham and Sheffield from Bradford. They stopped me on the M606 and offered me £10 to take them home. So I did." Boyle: "I don't believe that. I believe you went to Sheffield on Friday night with the sole purpose of picking up a prostitute." Sutcliffe: "That's not true. It was only after I got to Sheffield and had declined an offer to go with a prostitute that I decided to use the money I got from the hitchhikers and go with one." Boyle could feel Sutcliffe was close to breaking and continued to press him. Boyle: "When you were arrested in Sheffield you had a prostitute in your car which had false plates on it. I believe you put them on to conceal the identity of your vehicle in the event of it being seen in a prostitute area." Sutcliffe: "No. That's not true. To be honest with you, I've been so depressed that I put him on because I was thinking of committing a crime with the car." Boyle: "I believe the crime you were going to commit was to harm a prostitute." Sutcliffe: "No. That's not true." Boyle: "Do you recall that before you were put in a police car at Sheffield you left your car and went to the side of a house?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "Yes. I went to urinate against the wall." Boyle: "I think you went for another purpose." This time there was no response from Sutcliffe. Boyle: "Do you understand what I am saying? I think you are in trouble. Serious trouble." And then Sutcliffe let the cat out of the bag. Sutcliffe: "I think you have been leading up to it." Boyle: "Leading up to what?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "The Yorkshire Ripper." Boyle: "What about the Yorkshire Ripper?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "Well, it's me." He then advised to his right to a lawyer and questioned about further details. Boyle: "You didn't go to the side of the house to urinate, did you?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "No. I knew what you were leading up to. You've found the hammer and the knife, haven't you?" Quote, Boyle: "Yes, we have. Where did you put them?" Quote, Sutcliffe: "When they took the girl to the Panda car, black and white police cars. I nipped out and put them near the house in the corner. I was panicking. I was hoping to get bail from there and get a taxi back and to pick them up. Then I would have been in the clear." Boyle: "Tell me, if you are the so-called Ripper, how many women have you killed?" Quote, Sutcliffe: 11. But I haven't done that one at Preston. I've been to Preston but I haven't done that one. Boyle. Are you the author of the letters and the tape recording posted from Sunderland to the police and the press from a man admitting to be the Ripper? Quote, Sutcliffe. No, I am not. While ever that was going on I felt safe. I'm not a Geordie. I was born at Shipley. Boyle. Have you any idea who sent the letters and the tape? Quote, Sutcliffe. No. It's no one connected with me. I've no idea who sent them. Boyle. How did all this start? Quote, Sutcliffe. With Wilma McCann. I didn't mean to kill her at first. But she was mocking me. After that it just grew and grew until I became a beast. Later on, Sutcliffe was asked by Det Inspi Boyle, do you know all the names of your victims? Quote, Sutcliffe. Yes. I know them all. Boyle. Do you keep any press cuttings of them or make any records? Quote, Sutcliffe. No. They are all in my brain reminding me of the beast I am. The murder count was revised after Det Inspi Boyle inquired. You say you have killed 11 women. Just take your time and think about how many there are. Sutcliffe. It's 12. Not 11. Just thinking about them all reminds me what a monster I am. I know I would have gone on and on, but now I'm glad I've been caught. And I just want to unload the burden. All in all, it would take 15 hours and 45 minutes to dictate a detailed statement. This original confession, however, did not contain the full catalogue of 20 attacks that he was eventually charged with. Sutcliffe's confession only detailed 12 murders and 2 attempted murders. The one murder that Sutcliffe did not confess to at the time was the strangulation murder of Marguerite Walls. He had hoped it would not be recognized as one of his attacks. Later he said that he thought that confessing to it might open lots of new lines of inquiry that were nothing to do whatsoever with me, and that he preferred to just deal with the ones that had been attributed to me. Sutcliffe also vehemently denied responsibility for the murder of Joan Harrison. At 10:30 p.m. Sutcliffe's request to be the one to tell his wife, Sonia, that he was the Yorkshire Ripper was granted. Her reaction was unusual to say the least. When he told her, "It's me. I'm the Yorkshire Ripper. I killed all those women," all she said was, "What on earth did you do that for, Peter?" Quote, "So who was this man who so brutally ended the lives of so many women and kept the Yorkshire and surrounding areas in fear for so long?" Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as Peter William Coonan, was born into a family of highly religious Catholic parents at Bingley and Shipley Maternity Hospital on June 2, 1946. His father John, then aged 23, had recently been demobbed from the Merchant Navy and worked in a bakery. His 25-year-old mother Kathleen was employed in a munitions factory. He was born prematurely and doctors were not sure whether he would live. But he did. Sutcliffe was the first of their 7 children, one of whom, a brother, died after 3 days. He had 2 other brothers, Mick and Carl, and 3 sisters, Anne, Maureen and Jane. It is said that he preferred to be alone, in order to save himself from the bullying that he faced throughout his school years. He never discussed his issues with his parents, or with the few friends that he had. This turned him into a shy loner. On the surface they were a typical outgoing Yorkshire family. John Sutcliffe, a flamboyant and athletic man, played football and cricket for Bingley, sang and acted in an amateur dramatics group and prided himself on keeping the finest garden in the street. His wife, who had been quite a catch in her youth, with her trim figure and luxuriant black hair, was a devoted mother and homemaker. a kindly woman to whom neighbors would turn in a crisis. But behind the neat facade of the family's homes, first a rented, stone-built cottage, later a council house on a modern estate, life for young Peter Sutcliffe was less straightforward, perhaps because he was such a delicate child at birth, and his mother had lost her second son prematurely. She fussed over him constantly. He had weak ankles and was slow in learning to walk, so he would literally cling to her apron strings. And as he grew older, he showed no desire to play outside like other children, preferring to read. He loathed all sports and, until the age of 18, remained an altar boy at the Roman Catholic church he and his mother attended. This disappointed his brash, extroverted father, who dismissed him as weedy, and chastised Kathleen for mollycoddling him. Years later, he would even blame his wife's overindulgence for helping to turn their son into a mass murderer. At least, Mr. Sutcliffe consoled himself. His unathletic son was brainy. But Peter failed his exams and went to a tough secondary modern, where he was bullied and played truant to avoid his tormentors. His character contrasted sharply with that of his brothers, particularly Mick, who had a reputation as a local hardnut. Although the Sutcliffe parents presented themselves as paragons of strict virtue, his siblings were allowed to sleep with their boyfriends and girlfriends in the house from an early age, and his sister Maureen fell pregnant at 16. His father was notorious for mauling the young girls Mick and Carl brought home, and openly boasted of his one-night stands to his sons. As he ruled the house with an iron rod, they were too frightened of him to remonstrate. His father was a known alcoholic, and despite being a staunch Catholic, he did not respect his wife, the oldest of 6 children. Peter loved his mother. However, he could not take a stand for her, as he was afraid of getting beaten up by the father. Their father once smashed a beer glass over Peter's head for sitting in his chair at the Christmas table. After arguing, when the brother was 4 or 5 years old, his brother recalls, "My dad was a drinker. He used to belt hell out of us when we were kids. I remember when I was about 4 or 5, there was a bit of an argument and he smashed a beer glass into Peter's head. It was at the Christmas dinner table, and it was one of those big chunky glasses with dimples in. It was over something and nout. That really stuck in my mind." Their father also used to whip them with a belt. As for Peter's own violence, he is equally confused, although he did once drop him from a bedroom window for being cheeky. "He was great with me normally," he said. "He was a brilliant brother. He'd buy me presents, take me to the pictures and the skating rink. But I do remember there was one time when he held me by the feet out of the bedroom window. I thought, he's not going to drop me. But he did. On my head. I had a twisted neck and I had a real sore neck for weeks." The Sutcliffe family were always hard up, so Peter was expected to leave school at the earliest opportunity to earn his keep. He did various menial jobs such as an engineering internship, and in 1964, when he was 18, found work as a gravedigger at Bingley Cemetery and showed immense passion for it. It is also said to be a turning point in his life, which turned him into a sadist. He enjoyed watching the corpses and even worked extra hours. He would later get excited while telling his friends about how he had the best job in the world and how much he enjoyed the sight of the corpses. He was caught throwing a rock at an uncovered corpse. "This'll wake the bugger up," he scoffed, and looted coffins for jewelry. He would later claim that it was in the graveyard's Roman Catholic sector that he first heard the voice of God, describing this wonderful event at his trial. Sutcliffe said, "I was digging and I just paused for a minute. I heard something. It sounded like a voice similar to a human voice. Like an echo. I looked round to see if anyone was there but no one was in sight." He could not make out the words. He said, "But the voice had come from the top of a gravestone, which was Polish. I remember the name on the grave to this day. It was a man called Zapolowski. It had a terrific impact on me. I felt as though I had just experienced something fantastic. I felt I had been selected." If we believe him, this happened in 1967. When he was 21. He heard the voice hundreds of times afterwards, and at first it was benign and reassuring. 2 years would pass before the divine messages darkened, sending him on a mission to remove the prostitutes, to get rid of them.